Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone. And now here's your host and CEO of Ruh Global Impact, Debra Ruh.
Hello, everyone. My name is Debra Ruh, and this is Human Potential at Work. I'm the CEO of Ruh Global Impact and the co-founder and chairman of Billion Strong. And today's conversation, we're going to dive a bunch into Billion Strong type identity questions. Very timely conversation. So my guest today is Aversa, and he's actually joining us from Vietnam, which is cool. But welcome to the program, Drew.
Hi, Deborah. Thank you so much for having me on. Glad to be here with you today.
And usually you don't live in Vietnam. Where do you usually live?
I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area and have recently migrated to Oregon before this move. I've lived in Oregon before and really enjoy that, and now in Vietnam. So a person of the world. I say I'm homeless. I enjoy the world and all the different cultures and all the people that we get to meet as we live more of a digital lifestyle and are able to work and contribute globally.
Yeah, I've traveled the world. Not recently, though. I haven't traveled. Last place I traveled was San Francisco in I think it was December 2019. But it's still there, and I agree with you. Amazing people. The best thing we could all do is leave our borders and go and visit other countries so we can see that people are more alike than different. But let's talk a little bit about who you are, because I think you have a fascinating story. And Drew is an author, he's a coach, he's a keynote speaker, and he's a business consultant. Also, he didn't put this on there, but he's also an entrepreneur. Very exciting, the work that he's doing. But Drew, tell us a little bit about your story. I know that you were a firefighter and you became disabled, and I thought that was a very interesting part of your story. But tell us who you are.
Hey, Deborah, great to be here with you and audience listening. So, my name's Aversa. I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, and at a young age, life presented that big Y in the road, that big fork where we get to make decisions. And I saw two paths. One, my birth father was an executive and international tax lawyer, and then I saw my stepfather, who was a firefighter and then fire chief, and I saw really two different lives. And for me, at a young age, at 16 years old, I started riding along on the fire engine with my stepfather. And then I spent every shift I could in the summertime with him and the crew. And I had my own equipment. There wasn't a formal Explorer program at the time. I was the Explorer program. So back in the day when things were not like they are nowadays, but just you could hop on the fire engine. Here's your coat, kid. You're one of us. Like, we need your help. So it was an incredible experience. And really, when we talk about human potential, I think for me, I say growing up, I grew up a privileged life. And from there, I don't hide that. But what I saw was the humanity, right? You're seeing people at their worst. You're seeing people take their last breath of life. And at 16 years old, when most of your friends are, getting ready to go off to Ivy League schools or top schools, and then I was at a young age just fascinated by the calling of service, and just when you get to impact somebody's life right then and there as a paramedic. And so I went 17 years old to the junior college, and I went on to become one of the youngest paramedics at about 20 years old, and moved down to San Diego, worked in San Diego. One of the busiest ambulances in the United States. I came up to back to the Bay Area as a firefighter, and then unfortunately I had a career-ending injury that it was a two-part deal where my hip was crushed, and then I came back to work despite the odds. I was in a wheelchair for months, and then bedridden. So through the lens of disability, it gives you empathy in a way that when you're young and strong, and all of a sudden you go from being able-bodied to disabled and needing somebody to hold the door open for you, and seeing, I think, quickly how people change, where I say you go from hero to zero, where all of a sudden people are looking at you as a firefighter, and then the next second you're overweight, stuck in a wheelchair, can't exercise, a full-on beard, not shaving, just every little thing, they call it the activities of daily living that they base disability on. And when those things are so challenging for you, it was very humbling at that point. It was life-changing for me because I saw life completely different. You know, when you're faced with your own physical loss, that's huge. And then from there, coming back to the fire department, having a career-ending injury around 30, midlife. And at that point, I thought I would be at the peak of my career. I thought that this career, I saw my stepfather working for close to 30 years, that I would have the same story, that maybe there would be a third generation firefighter, that my son or daughter would go on to be in the fire service and carry that, legacy and that tradition forward. And unfortunately for me, at that time, it ended. So it was also a time where mental health wasn't talked about. This is 2010. So mental health was something that was really taboo. And during that time, I had to find my own treatment, my own healing path. And what I discovered were different things of somatic experiencing, yoga, meditation. I took a natural route when a lot of the stuff that was initially pushed at me were pills. And I said, how does somebody know within 15 minutes of knowing you that you should be on this pill? Not to say that there's anything wrong for people who do need that, but for me, I chose the natural path. I started reading about psychology. I started reading about the human condition, right? Human suffering that's been ever since biblical times, Buddhist times, the Quran, whatever faith people believe, spiritual, not pushing religion here. That the reality is humans have suffered and gone through catastrophic things since creation, or the Big Bang, whatever view people have on that. And it changed my life, and it really expanded things. So then I got into business. I went and got my MBA, my bachelor's degree and my MBA. And what I found during that time was extremely difficult, because I was very honest with the disability, with the injury, because firefighter career is an amazing career, especially working for one of the largest fire service agencies in the United States, a metropolitan agency. It's like working for Google of the fire service. And then next thing, people are going, well, how come you're not there anymore? That's very hard to get hired. How come you're no longer a firefighter? So what it did was it exposed my disability. And it was, very challenging to get hired until I had coaching to learn how to change my story, to not put the full story out there, and to focus on the fact that we had a successful family business that I was also involved in, and then changing the narrative of that to paint the picture that employers want to hear, which is minimizing risk and showcasing your performance. So I was fortunate that I figured that out, and then a great CEO in the construction industry took a chance on me. And that changed my life. Just having a great mentor, having a great person to position you at an executive level, straight into a director role in business development. And I was able to shine, to be able to connect the dots and develop a strategy. And then from there, I turned into a business development consultant and strategist and coach now, where I think I give people a very holistic lens on business, money. How do we use money for good? How do we motivate people? How do we change the workplace? And then how do we make it human? Because through my own experience, I also had a near-death experience at one point. And when you go through that on top of the physical, what that taught me is nothing's permanent. When there's a life after here, energy, metaphysics, everybody has a different view. That has never been.
I think we're human. We're spiritual beings having a human experience, and we should honor that.
Yeah.
Right. And as you said, as you're walking your journey, you're going to be a fireman, which we do really respect. We really respect. And emergency response people, I remember, obviously, I've had these situations where I've had to call the emergency response, and I always just am so grateful that people like you come and help. I remember when my mom was passing, and I had to call the fire department multiple times, and it was just beautiful how they responded and helped. And first of all, I was in trouble. My mom was in trouble. And I just remember just feeling so grateful for these individuals that wanted to come and help us. So I applaud what you've done with your life. But I also thought it was interesting as you were talking about it, how when you went back to the fire station before the career ending, you had a really bad injury, but you still hoped you were going to remain in the fire department, but how you were treated a little differently when you came back, even though they knew how you got hurt. You're one of them. You've been one of them a long time. But I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind exploring that a little bit.
Yeah, at that time, I think it was the status quo of culture. And I think nowadays, if people looked and saw the treatment that I endured through that, it would be a legal definition of harassment. And it's not appropriate. And in a tough guy club of what that culture was at the time, I think it's evolving, thank goodness, because it was very inappropriate and very painful. And not one that allows somebody to heal, not one that's supportive, and not one that really respects the drive and desire of somebody to want to return, right? And to, after if you put your body and your mind through all those things and then want to come back, that's dedication. And I think there's that fear in other people that, is this person fit, or is this, because it's a tough job. And at the end of the day, you have to be strong enough, because if something does happen to your colleague, they're counting on you to pull them also out of a fire potentially, or a tough situation. So I think there's a lot of subconscious fear. There's obviously the conscious act of people bullying and harassing and doing mean things to other people. But then there's also that subconscious fear, I think, too, of, is this person strong enough? Is this person there? And quite frankly, the system doesn't make it easy, because you have, when you're injured, in that case, you have about a year to come back to work. And then if you don't make it back to work, then you're medically retired. At that point, depending on the pension system, you may not even have a pension. You may not even have a disability retirement, which in my case, I got stuck between two cities that fought it out for 7 years, and there was never a disability retirement. So, yeah, plus I worked for private ambulance companies. So when you stack in there, I had a 10-year career in public safety on some of the busiest emergency response companies in the state of California, with nothing to show for it at the end. And that I really want to change, because had I been a veteran, our veterans are taken care of extremely well. And I know the VA it's a big target, but the VA also does incredible work. So you see negative press out there. That's just the media's job. So to stir things up. But overall, the VA does a great job. My friends who are veterans who do have similar injuries like mine, they receive money every month. Depending if they have children, there's different payments if you're disabled with a child. And one of the challenges too that you and I talked about, Debra, is there is disability of Social Security's definition of disability, and where maybe somebody needs a caretaker, they're in a wheelchair, they need assistance the whole time. But there's also being disabled from the occupation of firefighter. There's disabled from the occupation of police officer or school teacher or office worker for carpal tunnel, different things like that. So in this case, when somebody serves in a high-risk occupation and they're medically retired, it does not mean that there is a disability retirement, nor is that person eligible for Social Security's disability. And then from a long-term standpoint, the challenges with Social Security are, if you want to earn more than, what is it, like around $3,000, I think, a month, right? If you want to do that, and America is not cheap anymore, and with inflation, it's very difficult. We see how people live with disabilities who are on that margin. So if you want to pursue a career path or something like that, I think that what I learned was, having a disability and being in that gray zone, we need more policy around it. We need more support around it. And I'm not saying we should give handouts. What I am saying is, when you are disabled and you are going through therapy, including mental health, treatment, which is extremely expensive, because at that time, cash pay, hello, most people don't want that on their insurance. So that's the reality, right? That's just the reality. And then some of the top therapists do not accept insurance in mental health. So some of the best people out there in mental health truly don't accept insurance. So then you're stuck with the cash pay model. And that's very expensive. When you look at that and there's no support, to me, I really hope that changes. And it's unfortunate. I think it's a battle, because when you look at the Zadroga Act with the 9/11 first responders, and you look at John Field is an incredible man who's done a lot of advocacy work for the first responders, with Jon Stewart from the Daily Show. They did a lot of work with the 9/11 survivors. And it's just, to me, mind-boggling how our elected officials can say, thank you for your service. And we have like some states, because it's state to state, it's not federal. So we really need federal legislation for first responders. So every state's the same. And there aren't these discrepancies because one state, for example, may cover a firefighter for a disability or cancer. Let's just use cancer, make it simple. And then the next state over is a right to work state, and they're not progressive in their policies. And the firefighter has to prove on their their deathbed that they got cancer from the job, as opposed to California that has a presumptive law that presumes the cancer came from being a firefighter. So that's what our first responders are going through. And then for there, I got really involved in advocacy work through this and was appointed to the state of California's Committee on Employment of Persons with Disabilities, which was just a wonderful, experience to be able to contribute and to share my perspective, bridging the gap between the physical disability community as well as the mental health disability community, because both are so connected yet often siloed or segmented in their advocacy work.
Right. Plus, there's also invisible disabilities that aren't mental health related. So there's the physical, there's invisible, which includes mental. But I want to explore some of these things that you did. And I also want to state that you are talking about this from the lens of the United States, but when we leave the borders of the United States, it gets worse and worse. So this is not actually, things are better in the U.S. for our first responders than other countries. So there's a major global issue here that we're not addressing. But I want to just dig into some of these things. One thing that, and I've talked about this on air before, but it's also different when it comes to a male versus a female, because men are being told you shouldn't talk about things like that and be tough man. And so there's that image that we impose upon men, and men don't talk about their pain. They don't talk about their disabilities. They don't talk about their real lived experiences. And I know you've addressed it from that a little bit, and it is great that you are talking about these issues from your viewpoint in California and stuff, because we need more people with lived experience with disabilities, whether you're born with it or you acquire it because you're a human being. And you also made some comments about how tough the journey was for you. But everybody has a tough journey. Everybody's going to walk contrast. That's part of why we're here. So these horrible things happen to us, but if we can try to not let it crush us, and we can instead learn from it like Drew did, then not only does he improve his own life, but he also helps others improve their lives. So I think I talk obviously about disability all the time, and everybody is going to walk trauma in their life. And even during this COVID-19, we hear statistics that 65% of Americans are going to have PTSD after this. And I think it's going to be higher than that, because the whole world is being traumatized right now. And everybody is fighting something and just doing their best to just get through. But we always have to acknowledge how hard it is right now for everyone. But I know that part of your work is really focused on men's health and men's leadership. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about that. I know as a professional coach and a business leader, I don't see men always seeking help. Women are faster to seek help than men are. And so I was just wondering if you wanted to explore that a bit, because I know that's something that you deal with professionally as well, personally and professionally.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Debra. I think for me, the journey was the healing journey. And on that path, I went through a program. It's called Save a Warrior. And I think for people with veterans and first responders in your family, it's truly a life-saving, life-changing program. There's another program out there called Mighty Oaks Warrior Program. And then there's a West Coast Post-Trauma Retreat. So those are three for first responders. And these are experiential programs. So you get to go and you have an experience. And they're usually about a week long, and they're led by in some cases they're co-ed, others are all men. The program that I went through was Save a Warrior. It was 10 men. And what I discovered was the prevalence of childhood trauma. And it was the first time that I'd been through therapy, I'd been through counseling, whatever you want to call it, and the talk therapy. So I'd been through that. And what I really realized was, unless somebody's walked that path, and they're vulnerable enough to share it, sometimes we can go through therapy, but if the therapist hasn't even accessed that, then that brings up their wound. And I went to Bessel van der Kolk's workshop. He's amazing, one of the top trauma experts in the world, who wrote The Body Keeps a Score. And Yeah, Bess was very direct. If you've been to any of his trainings, an amazing person. And why do people get into this field? Why do people get into psychology? It's usually because, there's some challenges that people are trying to work out. That's what leads you into it, which is accurate and it's honest and it's blunt, but it's where things are. So what I discovered was if a therapist hasn't accessed that, how can they walk somebody through it? Because some of the stuff, like you mentioned, it's years and years. It's just the human condition that we're talking about. And then when we study things, if we throw the science lens and we look at epigenetics, or we look at the study on mice where the first mouse was shocked at feeding time, and 5 generations later it exhibited signs of trauma without any shock, it passes through genetically. And then there's the psychosocial model where we look at biology and genetics, and we look at psychology and sociology. So for me, I was always a top academic, and I was a paramedic, so I understand the body, I understand the mind. I also became a yoga instructor on my journey. But for me, I look at things from a very holistic lens of the benefits of Western medicine and healthcare, as well as things like Eastern medicine that have been around for 3,000 years. And there are truths in both. And then how do we get to a common ground? And what I discovered was this childhood trauma piece was just massive. Then when you look at the research with ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences from Kaiser, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who's now the first Surgeon General for the state of California, the ACEs research shows that the more a child experiences trauma early in life, it changes the brain. It changes their ability to emotionally regulate. It changes the hormone structure that can lead to diabetes, that can lead to dis-ease, which is driven through inflammation via stress. And Americans don't want to talk about stress because our foundation was built on stress, hard work. You're a good American if you work hard. Nonsense. Be a good person and enjoy the journey, enjoy the path, and you're going to get there. So through that experience in leadership roles, men oftentimes have issues communicating. There are the Me Too issues that we see out there, and there's a lot of pain. And when we can get to truth, and for me, I share my journey, and typically what I find is other guys start opening up, and it drops the BS and it drops the tough guy stuff. And I remember I was in San Francisco, and we had a nice dinner, and we're in the bathroom, the stall, the John and John next to each other. And the older gentleman, he just opened up to me. He's, "Thank you so much for sharing that. I went through what you went through." And he's like, "This is the only time I've admitted it," literally like standing next to each other in the bathroom. It's powerful moments. It's healing because you don't know what that allows that person to do. And when they can heal, there's more connection, there's more love, there's more trust, there's just a better world that we can get to. So that's the work too, is working with CEOs, working with business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, is sharing my authentic journey and my truth. And what I typically find is other people start opening up, and then not only do they want to work on building a profitable business, but they also want to figure out, okay, all this stuff that we got taught in business school, this tough, leadership stuff and all this rhetoric and all these classic management books, maybe it's not, like, maybe we got to go to this thing called trauma. Maybe we need to look at how are we, if people are multimillionaires, how can you help the mom who's working in your office with 3 jobs, like my mom did when my parents got divorced, and trying to be there for the children. And it's stressful. And as a young child, I remember going to the butcher shop right next door, and you're on your own as a young kid walking next door to go pick up groceries. And it's scary as a young kid, but you're trying to help mom out. And so these sort of things, a human thing. And what I really discovered was trauma is truth, and it's a big truth that we just don't talk about nearly enough. And I think if we do, and if we can get to it, we can change the workplace. We can change. You and I talked about these young kids who get sent to prison, who have post-traumatic stress, who the brain's not reacting, and next thing they end up in the criminal justice system instead of in a social worker's office, and having people come out to the home and making sure that they actually have food in the fridge. And these are things I saw as a paramedic. I worked in a town called Richmond, California, and at that time it had one of the highest per capita homicide rate in the state of California. And Richmond was where the Rosie the Riveters built the wartime ships. So you saw the change through public policy of the grandmothers who owned the homes to the young kids who were selling crack and being shot in the gangs because they didn't have jobs. The school system left them behind. Our society left them behind through the public policy that we enacted in the US that caused housing segregation and different things like that. And you look at the refineries are there, health issues are rampant in that community, those sort of things. I
There
think it
are a
just,
lot of issues. Yeah, there's a
yeah,
lot of issues. And what I want to do is, we know there's a lot of issues. And I want to spend, I know we only have a few minutes left, but let's talk about some of the solutions. And you have been talking about some of the solutions. I know I also do yoga, and I think it's such a blessing. I'm also a child of trauma. I went through dramatic trauma during my childhood, but they always say that from birth until 7 years old is when you're becoming who you're going to be. And if you were traumatized during that time, which unfortunately I was, it affects who you become. But what I've done, I've channeled all of my trauma, the trauma around me, all the people, because people are traumatized, especially right now. And I just tried to channel it to do good. And even if you've had walked these really tough times, you've had trauma, which if you're a human, you've had trauma. There's so many ways that we can channel it to do good, to help ourselves and help others. And that your story is a perfect example of that. But whenever you talk about, the thing that I find interesting about coaches is that anybody can say they're a coach. Anybody can say they're a coach. And so I always say to the audience, and because I've featured other coaches and stuff, you have to do your homework. You have to really do your homework, because who is this person, and how are they applying their own life experiences, and how is that going to help you? And I'm pitched all day long on LinkedIn for people that want to coach me. And I always find it interesting that they're offering to coach me when they don't even know who I am or whether or not they really can coach me. So it's important to understand who you're going to for help. And so that's one reason why I have the guests that I have, just so that we can have the different experiences. But I remember I had a clinical social worker, a clinical psychologist, I don't know, a couple of months ago, and she was born with muscular dystrophy. And she just made a comment that I found so profound. And she said, if the only thing I had to battle in my life was my muscular dystrophy, I think I could handle that. But it's how society treats me and how society disables me and it discounts me. That is the really big problem in my life. And luckily, she's a therapist and she's working with others. And now she's finding that people that don't have lived experiences with disabilities want to work with her, because she actually has taken the traumas in her life and used it to build a pretty empowering life that not only helps her, but helps others. And I think you're one of those people as well. So with the last few minutes that we have left, I want you to tell the audience, if you don't mind, how they can contact you, but also talk a little bit more about how you engage with people as a coach, because I think that might be helpful for anyone that's listening and trying to figure their life out too. And I think a lot of us are reevaluating our lives during these COVID-19 times, because one of my friends said that we were sent home by Mother Nature. She put us in timeout to think about what we've been doing.
I agree.
And I agree with that too. Let me just give you the stage to talk about those final things.
I would say Debra is one that we didn't touch on earlier too was COVID right now. And I know it's a cliched, it's okay to not be okay, but the reality is extremely stressful time. I actually worked on the initial emergency response and communication stuff at the start of COVID with a large county and an organization that was contracted to that county. And the early onset, it was highly political, unfortunately, with Republicans versus Democrats. And it was extremely unprofessional and eroded public trust, in my humble opinion, having been involved behind the scenes on that and now being able to speak a little bit more public on it. So I would say, one, be mindful of the media. It's just so divisive in America right now. It's really sickening.
In the world. It's not
and
just
in the, yeah, yeah.
No, it's everywhere. And this is a global show. I have a very global audience. So yeah, it is in the US, but it's global. This is our planet.
Yeah. So be careful of what you consume, and what, like you mentioned, if you're researching coaches, research your facts and all that. Be mindful of what you're consuming, because that affects the stress response in the body, and that leads into depression and leads into other illnesses and other things like that. We just know what stress does to people. So I would say, one, on there, and then two, have a support group. I think people are isolated in their homes like we're doing right now. We get to see each other on Zoom or this podcast platform, and we're seeing each other. So we're connecting. So there's definitely ways to do that. And then I would also say, understand the science, right? For young people need to be smart. They need to be smart and they need to be respectful to the older people and other people that have comorbid illnesses, the disability community, other communities out there that are more predisposed. But if you're healthy and you're young, wear a mask, wash your freaking hands. Don't go to parties and these COVID parties, these stupid things on the news. But be smart. You can still get together with a friend or go take a walk and hiking. And that was the hard part with COVID, is a lot of stuff, it was airborne from the start. And then we didn't tell people that. And then next thing it came out that it's airborne. And my background as a first responder, I knew through and through from the start of this thing. So I was watching the politics of it. I'm just like, yeah. So go educate yourself on if you are out in an open space or you have nature around you, go for a nice hike, get out there in nature. You can call a friend to go out with you. You don't have to be stuck living in fear, paranoid in an apartment, and keep some space around you and do that. So there are things that you can do that you're not making it worse for yourself. And as for employers, I would say be aware of this returning the people back to the workplace. And people are having a lot of anxiety. And if we do that, we're going to have a massive issue with the workforce, with more sick days than employers even know what to begin with, and more turnover and all these other things that employers don't want. So you have to think strategically about how can people ease back into the offices? What sort of things, if somebody doesn't feel comfortable and they're your A player, do you fire them because they've been working from home for a year and they don't really feel comfortable?
And they're more productive working from home.
Right.
More productive. So focus on the right things, business, which is you want us to be productive. Give us our work-life balance. I agree. And I know some people that are being told to go back now and they're actually looking for new jobs. So if you want to be an employer of choice, you better make teleworking part of it, because we're not going to work for you otherwise. You want the talent, and the talent knows. We know whether or not we're willing to do this. So yeah, very powerful. I agree with you. Now, Drew, how can people locate you?
So on that part, Drew Aversa, DREWAVERSA.com. You can view me. You can check on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. LinkedIn's a big one. I don't have a Twitter following like you, Deborah. I have 10 people on Twitter, but I have a lot on LinkedIn. So yeah, I'm on the different social media, but as far as getting together on my website, there's a schedule a call. So if you'd like to talk, and then my process is really a one-on-one phone call or with the team, depending on if it's a consulting project, and then really looking at the holistic landscape of where you are today in present state, where do you want to go? What does it look like? And then helping people align, helping people flush out things. I always say people have a lot of the answers within them, and coaching. Athletes have coaches. The president of the United States has a coach. So,
well, that's what I was going to say. Right. I was going to remind the audience. I think it's very helpful to have a coach. I've had a coach many times, and I actually have a coach, Doug Foresta, who is also a licensed clinical worker. He has been my mentor and coach for many years. He's just amazing. He's also my producer, but I think one of the best things we can do for ourselves is find the right coach, but you do have to do your homework. You do have, and Drew doesn't only work with men, he also works with women as well. He is able to talk to men in a different way, and we need that. So I think it's important to highlight people that have impressive journeys like you, and that have you figured out how to navigate your life and how you can help others. So I really do appreciate you, Drew, and I know the audience will appreciate what you've done as well. I do recommend coaches. And any final words, Drew, before we let the audience go?
One is, you've been given an incredible life, so go live it. Deborah and I were talking about it. You're at the start. I'm in Asia right now, and life truly is an amazing journey if you get through those challenging points. And then whether it's a coach, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a therapist, whoever, a guide, on your journey. I view myself really as a guide, whether it's helping somebody train their sales team or helping them get to the next level in life. It's that guide, and know your reset point. That was the biggest thing that I learned going through the journey, was there's that threshold, right? Where I think we all know if we don't do the work, then we get into that dark, deep space of anxiety and depression and horrible thoughts. And life just seems overwhelming. So know your reset point. And once you know that reset point, then it's up to you as a grown adult to never go back to that point again, and then do the work to find joy, gratitude, and be of service to other people, because that's the key thing. Is wisdom gets passed down from the story that we're sharing today, and it may hit somebody, and then it's just paying it forward, just being a good person and being vulnerable. I at first was a little shy when I started sharing my story about things and the different pieces of what happened, and now I'm 110% authentically me. So I encourage you to do that, because there are people like Debra in this world who would love to hear your story and have you on a podcast or hire you or whatever. They're amazing people. So just when you think that you're not fitting in or whatever in your current environment, just remember this world is full of billions of people. And out of those billions of people throughout the world are amazing people who want to get to know you.
I agree. And I think also I want to say that don't believe what other people say about you. It's not your business. That's what Maya Angelou said. It's not your business what other people think about you. And I find that's true. I can't worry about what other people think about me. Oh, your hair is purple. If you don't like it, don't look. But I think it's so important that we honor ourselves and we don't worry about what other people say. And my daughter has Down syndrome and she's moved back home, and she was saying something about being normal. And I said, being normal is just overrated. I don't want to be normal. I find it's too much fun getting to know who I am and who others are. So let's take the time to give ourselves a break, be kind to each other, understand we're all walking trauma, and that it's not your business what other people think about you, but it really matters what you think about yourself. And I know Drew definitely believes that. So as a reminder, it's drewaversa.com, and we will make sure that we provide those links for the show. But Drew, thank you for being on the program today. We appreciate you. We appreciate everything you're doing in the world.
Appreciate you as well, and glad to be here. And everybody, never give up on yourself. Keep going.
Yes, never give up on yourself. Wise words. Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to Human Potential at Work, brought to you by Ruh Global Impact. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your audio. To learn more about Ruh Global Impact and the services we provide, visit ruhglobal.com. To learn more about how you can become a sponsor of Human Potential at Work, email David at ruhglobal.com. That's David at ruhglobal.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back next time with a new episode.